July 28, 1944, 0:43 hours, the Führerbunker, Berlin. The concrete walls sweat in the stale heat, thick with cigarette smoke and the sour smell of damp earth. Above ground, the city shudders as distant bombs land somewhere beyond the Tiergarten, dull, rolling impacts that vibrate down into the bunker like a slow, fatal heartbeat. Maps tremble on the walls. A light flickers, steadies, then flickers again. Adolf Hitler stands hunched over a long wooden table, his fingers pressed into the edge hard enough to whiten the knuckles. Red and blue pins scatter across the map of Germany, many of them already pushed back, retreating west and east at once. Berlin is marked with a tight cluster of red circles, air raid zones, firestorms, civilian loss. General Alfred Jodl clears his throat. Mein Führer. Hamburg is effectively crippled. Essen and Cologne report catastrophic housing loss. Civilian morale. Hitler cuts him off with a sharp, slicing gesture. His voice is low, controlled, almost tired. Cities are not Germany. The room goes still. You can hear the distant anti-aircraft guns now, the hollow thud of flak rising to meet Allied bombers that no one in this room can see. Hitler straightens slowly, eyes fixed not on the cities, but on the industrial regions and transportation lines marked deeper inland. If the German people cannot endure, he says, then they are weak. The Reich does not depend on apartments and shopfronts. It depends on will. Around him, officers exchange glances but say nothing. They have seen the change. This is not the Hitler of early victories, promising protection and prosperity. This is a man recalculating survival itself, stripping it down to factories, arms, and obedience. Civilians are no longer something to be defended. They are something to be spent. Another explosion rattles dust from the ceiling. Somewhere above, Berlin burns again. Hitler doesn't flinch. He leans closer to the map, as if the ruined cities are already behind him, already written off. In this bunker, beneath a dying capital, a new belief has settled in. Germany can survive without its cities, without its people, if the war can still be fought. March 18, 1943, 22:10 hours, Reich Chancellery Air Raid Shelter, Berlin. The sirens begin their long, rising wail just as Albert Speer steps into the underground corridor. The sound stretches, echoes, then dissolves into a distant roar as the first Allied bombs fall. The shelter lights dim briefly, then stabilize, casting hard shadows across steel doors and concrete arches. Speer pauses, listening. He can tell from the rhythm, this is not a small raid. This is methodical. Deliberate. Inside the briefing room, Hitler is already seated, shoulders rigid, eyes fixed on a production chart pinned to the wall. It shows tank output, ammunition figures, synthetic fuel estimates. No civilian data. No housing. No casualty projections. Speer begins carefully. Mein Führer, the bombing is accelerating faster than repairs. Housing losses are now interfering with labor availability. Entire districts. Hitler doesn't look up. Workers can be relocated, he says flatly. Another explosion rolls overhead, closer this time. Dust shakes loose from the ceiling. Factories must continue. That is all that matters. You can feel the shift here. Not anger. Not denial. Something colder. The old idea, that cities must be defended to preserve morale, is gone. In its place is arithmetic. Input and output. What produces weapons stays. What doesn't is expendable. Speer presses on, despite himself. If the raids continue at this intensity, civilian death will rise sharply. Firestorms like Hamburg could. Hitler's head snaps up. His eyes are sharp, almost resentful. Hamburg proved nothing except weakness, he says. If the people cannot endure bombardment, then they are not worthy of survival. History is not decided by comfort. Another bomb lands close enough to make the lights flicker. Somewhere, concrete cracks. No one moves. From this moment on, civil defense becomes secondary. Anti-aircraft guns are reassigned to protect factories, not neighborhoods. Resources once used for shelters are diverted to armaments. The cities are no longer shields around the Reich. They are buffers, meant to absorb punishment while the war machine grinds on beneath them. As the raid continues above, Speer realizes the implication with a quiet chill. Germany's leadership has accepted the destruction of its own cities as a strategic condition, not a failure. The sirens outside fade into the distance. Fires will burn through the night. And inside the bunker, the idea settles deeper, that survival no longer includes the civilian world at all. March 19, 1945, 6:20 hours, Führerbunker, Berlin. The air is colder now, sharper, heavy with the smell of oil and damp concrete. The Reich is collapsing on every front. Artillery rumbles closer each day, a distant, relentless thunder that never truly stops. On the map table, Germany has shrunk to a wounded core, red arrows pressing in from east and west. Hitler sits rigid, his hands trembling slightly as he grips a pencil. Across from him stands Albert Speer, summoned at dawn. He already knows this will be bad. Hitler begins without preamble. If the war is lost, he says quietly, the nation will perish. There is no need to consider the future of the German people. You can feel the words land like a physical blow. Speer stiffens. Hitler slides a typed document across the table. The Nero Decree. Orders to destroy Germany's remaining infrastructure. Bridges, factories, power plants, transport hubs, anything that might be used by the advancing Allies. Cities are to be rendered uninhabitable. Not defended. Erased. The people have failed, Hitler continues, voice flat. They have proven weaker than the enemy. Let them go under. Above them, Berlin is already a ruin. Streets are piles of brick and ash. Civilians move like ghosts between cellars and rubble, searching for water, for bread, for shelter that no longer exists. And now, from deep underground, comes the final confirmation: the leadership will not save them. It will finish what the bombers began. Speer tries once more. Mein Führer, this would mean the death of millions after the fighting ends. There would be nothing left. Hitler doesn't argue. He simply looks away. The decision has already been made. In his mind, the cities are no longer Germany. They are evidence of failure, something to be wiped clean. As Speer leaves the bunker, the corridor shakes with another nearby impact. Dust falls. Somewhere above, a building collapses. The decree is already being transmitted. For the first time, the destruction of Germany's cities is no longer an enemy action. It is policy. April 21, 1945, 1840 hours, central Berlin. The sky hangs low and brown, thick with smoke and pulverized brick dust. Soviet artillery slams into the city in rhythmic waves, each impact echoing through streets that no longer resemble streets at all, only corridors of rubble and fire. You move through the ruins and realize there is nothing left to defend. In a shattered apartment block near the Spree, civilians huddle in a cellar lit by a single candle. An old woman clutches a photograph. A child presses his hands over his ears, though the shelling never really stops. Above them, Germany's capital collapses piece by piece. Deep underground, in the Führerbunker, Hitler listens to reports with a distant, almost detached expression. The Red Army is inside the city. Communications fail by the hour. Yet his focus is not on evacuation, not on relief, not on survival. The people will pay for their weakness, he says to those still gathered around him. History will absolve only the strong. By now, the belief is complete. Cities are no longer homes. They are liabilities. If Germany cannot win, then Germany, its streets, its civilians, its future, deserves no mercy, not even from its own leadership. Albert Speer quietly sabotages the Nero Decree where he can, delaying destruction orders, sparing bridges and power plants when possible. But much has already been lost. Entire urban centers lie in ruins, sacrificed not just to Allied bombs, but to a worldview that abandoned its people long before the final shots were fired. On April 30th, in the same bunker where cities were written off as expendable, Hitler takes his own life. The war ends days later. Germany survives, but not in the way he imagined. The cities are rebuilt. The people endure. And history remembers the chilling truth revealed in the final months of the Reich. When defeat became inevitable, Hitler chose ideology over humanity, accepting the destruction of his own nation as the price of failure.